Good morning, students. Hope you all are fine. Today we are going to start with the next chapter of history called New Kings and Kingdoms. Many new dynasties emerged after the 7th century. By the 7th century, there were big landlords or warrior chiefs in different regions of the subcontinent. Existing kings often acknowledged them as their subordinates or samantas. They were expected to bring gifts for their kings or overlords, be present at their courts, and provide them with military support. As samantas gained power and wealth, they declared themselves to be Mahasamanta Mahamandaleshwara. Let us discuss an instance of the Rashtrakutas in the Deccan. Initially, they were subordinate to the Chalukyas of Karnataka. In the mid 18th century, Dantidurga, a Rashtrakuta chief, overthrew his Chalukya overlord and performed a ritual called Hiranya Garbha. When his ritual was performed with the help of Brahmins, it was thought to lead to the rebirth of the sacrificer as a Kshatriya, even he was not one by birth. In other cases, men from enterprising families used their military skills to carve out kingdoms. For instance, the Kadamba, Mayur Sharman, and the Gurjapatihara Harichandra were Brahmins who gave up their traditional professions and took to arms successfully, establishing kingdoms in Karnataka and Rajasthan respectively. Many of these new kings adopted high surrounding titles such as Maharaja Adiraja, Tribhuvana Chakravartin, and so on. However, in spite of such claims, they often shared power with their samantas as well as with associations of peasants, traders, and Brahmins. In each of these states, resources were obtained from the producers, that is, peasants, cattle keepers, artisans, who were often persuaded or compelled to surrender part of what they produced. Sometimes these were claimed as rent due to a lord who asserted that he owned the land. Revenue was also collected from traders. These resources were used to finance the king's establishment as well as for the construction of temples and forts. They were also used to fight wars, which were in turn expected to lead to the purchase of wealth in the form of plunder and access to land as well as trade routes. The functionaries for collecting revenue were generally recruited from influential families and positions were often hereditary. This was true about the army as well. In many cases, close relatives of the king held these positions. Now let us talk about prashastis and land grants. Prashastis contain details that may not be literally true, but they tell us how rulers wanted to depict themselves as victorious warriors. For example, these were composed by learned Brahmins who occasionally helped in the administration. Kings often rewarded Brahmins by grants of land. These were recorded on copper plates, which were given to those who received the land. Unusual for the 12th century was a long Sanskrit poem containing the history of kings who ruled over Kashmir. It was composed by an author named Kalhana. He used a variety of sources, including inscriptions, documents, eyewitness accounts, and earlier histories, to write his account. Unlike the writers of Prashastis, he was often critical about rulers and their policies. You may have noticed that Each of these ruling dynasties was based in a specific region. At the same time, they tried to control other areas. One particularly prized area was the city of Kannauj in the Ganga Valley. For centuries, rulers belonging to the Gurja Pratihara, Rashtrakuta, and Pala dynasties fought for control over Kannauj. Because there were three parties in this long drawn conflict. Historians often describe it as the tripartite struggle. Rulers also tried to demonstrate their power and resources by building large temples. So, when they attacked one another's kingdoms, they often chose to target temples which were sometimes extremely rich. One of the best known of such rulers is Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, Afghanistan. He ruled from 997 to 1030 and extended control over parts of Central Asia, Iran, and the northwestern part of the subcontinent. He raided the subcontinent almost every year. His targets were wealthy temples, including that of Somnath, Gujarat. Much of the wealth Mahmud carried away was used to create a splendid capital city at Ghazni. Sultan Mahmud was also interested in finding out more about the people he conquered and entrusted a scholar named Al Biruni to write an account of the subcontinent. This Arabic work, known as the Kitab ul Hind, remains an important source for historians. He consulted Sanskrit scholars to prepare this account. Other kings who engaged in warfare included the Chamans, later known as the Chauhans, who ruled over the region around Delhi and Ajmer. They attempted to expand their control to the west and the east, where they were opposed by the Chalukyas of Gujarat and Gaidawals of western Uttar Pradesh. The best known Chaman's ruler was Prithviraj III, who defeated an Afghan ruler named Sultan Muhammad Ghori in 1191, but lost of him the very next year in 1192.